When people think about climate change, they usually picture a massive corporation's waste runoff, factories, or government policies. But after calculating my personal carbon footprint, I realized one of my biggest sources of emissions was sitting right in my driveway. My daily driver is a 1965 Ford Mustang that averages around 13 miles per gallon. This experiment has given me an opportunity to park it, conduct some lawn needed maintenance, whilst attempting to undergo a major carbon footprint reduction measured over a 2 week period. My idea is simple. I began by inputting data into coolclimate.org's carbon footprint calculator. I would start by calculating the CO2 footprint of my 65 Mustang. The car, on a good day, makes around 13 miles per gallon. So after inputting that into the carbon footprint calculator, I can observe that my car fuel CO2 output per year is roughly about 10.23 tons, and my car manufacturer rating is 1.3 tons, totaling out to 11.63 tons of CO2 per year. In contrast, when removing the gasoline vehicle and replacing it with an electric vehicle that travels the same mileage, my car fuel is reduced to a zero output, and the car manufacturing would be reduced by about half. The estimated kilowatt hour per year I would use in a 230-mile per week commute comes in at around 3,860 kilowatt hours. Therefore, I added that into the electricity consumption calculator, totaling out to be 2.48 tons of CO2 per year. This results in a calculated difference of 8.76 tons of CO2 per year between driving an EV versus a 1965 Mustang. The goal of this experiment was to reduce my carbon footprint over a 2 week period by deciding to conduct all of my driving with our family's EV, a 2022 Ford Mustang Mach-E, instead of my 65. I chose this action because I believe it's the simplest, most effective, and behaviorally sustainable action that I can take to reduce my yearly footprint. My methodology was pretty simple. With the 65 under construction, all I really needed to do was take the keys to the Mach-E and do everything I normally do for 2 weeks. If you like data for this project, I primarily utilize charging records in combination with my vehicle's recorded trip history during my 2 week period to track how much electricity I use to achieve the same commuting needs. From the presenting graphs, we can see that my Emporia charging system collected over this 2 week period. In total, I averaged around 10.72 kilowatt hours per day of use, using a total of 160 kilowatt hours over the 2 week period. All this power was collected over 5 charging sessions, averaging around 35 kilowatt hours per session. These sessions were conducted at night during George Power's super off peak hours between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. This ensures the best financial savings for me, as well as limiting the strain on the grid during high demand hours. My average kilowatt hours for the 2 week trip was around 3.1 kilowatt hours per mile over the course of 498 miles, with the majority of the energy being used for driving, with the rest broken up into exterior temperature loss and other accessory features. The following are my final results, determined by all the data collected in the experiment. The 1965 Mustang, estimated at 13 miles per gallon driven for 498 miles, would have used about 38 gallons of fuel at a cost of $134.50. In contrast, the 2022 Mach-E, with 3.1 miles per kilowatt hour driven at 498 miles, used 160.81 kilowatt hours of energy at the cost of $3.21. In terms of emissions, the 2022 Mach-E produced 0.10 tons of CO2 during the 2 week measuring period, through charging consumption primarily, while the 1965 Mustang would have produced 0.44 tons of CO2 in the same period. One of the most interesting parts of this experiment was realizing how much of an impact a single behavioral change could actually make. After seeing the measurable reduction in emissions from simply changing the vehicle I use for commuting, it made me feel like the issue was much more personal and realistic. What surprised me the most was how easy the transition actually was. I was still driving the same routes, commuting the same distances, and maintaining my normal routine, but with a dramatically lower environmental impact. This project also made me appreciate the trade-offs involved. Driving around a 65 Mustang with a 333-stroker engine versus a single-geared high-torque EV that makes no audible noise and barely any vibrations are two entirely different driving experiences. While one could describe the EV driving experience as a bit boring, especially over something like a 65 Mustang, what it did offer me was the ability to just hang out, listen to music, make hands-free calls, listen to podcasts. For me, this experiment was not about completely rejecting older vehicles, but more just about understanding the measurable environmental consequences tied to my own transportation choices. Overall, I think this experience helped me better understand how sustainability can be applied in practical ways without necessarily requiring any extreme lifestyle changes. I believe the project helped me directly achieve several of the learning outcomes from the course, especially understanding sustainability and relating scientific principles to the real world environmental problems. By tracking the mileage, electricity consumption, charging records, fuel estimates, and carbon emissions, I was able to apply scientific tools and calculations to evaluate a real environmental issue. I believe the project strengthened my understanding of sustainability and climate change by showing how fossil fuel consumption directly contributes to carbon emissions, and how alternative technologies like electric vehicles can help reduce the impact. But I think most importantly, this project showed me that my own individual actions can create a serious and meaningful impact on the environment over time.